Welcome to the RebelRebel podcast. I'm your host, Michael Dargie. The RebelRebel podcast is a show that celebrates creative rebels and entrepreneurs all over the world. It's a love letter to those people who think audaciously and act courageously in the pursuit of making the world a better and more interesting place. Thank you to Make More Creative for producing the show and helping us reach people in 65 different countries. 65 and growing. That's incredible. If you're a creative rebel with a story to tell, or you know one, head on over to the RebelRebelPodcast.com and fill out the guest request form. We'd love to hear from you, first of all. And second of all, who knows, you might be the next guest on our show. And while you're thinking about all that stuff, why don't you like, share, subscribe, wherever you do that stuff and wherever you're seeing this or hearing this. Every time you interact with the show, it helps us more than you know. So if you could just do that little thing, we sure would appreciate it. And you know, if you feel so inclined, head on over to our store. We got some cool merch. There's some great shirts. There's even a coffee mug to help you wake up in the morning, which is kind of fun. Well, the coffee mug won't help you wake up, but what you put in it will. Or if you'd like to become a sponsor, just send us a note to studio@therebelrebelpodcast.com. Today's episode, I've got Dave Zaboski with me. And Dave used to be a senior animator at Disney. He's currently the CCO, let's call it freedom fighter for creatives at Laetro.com. And man, he's got so many great stories and so many life lessons. I'd love to go all, cliffhanger on you, but I'm not. I mean, everything is going to be answered in this episode, and the stuff that you're going to learn, behind the scenes stuff, there's a vault, there's a secret password, there's the universe, there's all sorts of stuff. When a character becomes real, it's all in there. I know you'll enjoy the show. Please sit back, relax, and meet Dave Zaboski. Welcome to the Rebel Rebel. I'm your host, Michael Dargie, and somewhere across the universe is Dave Zaboski. And Dave, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm over here in this part of the universe.
Yeah, nice. I'm over in this one.
Oh, nice. All right, good.
Yeah. So just to catch us up, where are you actually in the universe right now?
I am in sunny Los Angeles right now, and it's the middle of December, and it's 74 degrees out there.
I don't know how to convert that on the fly to Celsius, which is where I'm from.
Right.
I'm going to say it's probably way nicer than it is here, because it's like -6.
It's warm.
Nice.
It's a warm Truman Show type of day.
Oh, that's nice. That's a great reference too. So Dave, I'm not going to spoil the plot here, but you're a Disney animator turned entrepreneur. You're a lifelong artist, and you've got some really cool shit going on. But I wondered if you might be able to sort of maybe hit us with what's happening right now, and then we'll backtrack and find out how you got here.
Perfect. Right. Right now, I'm an accidental tech exec in a bona fide Silicon Valley startup that, I know. This is not my beautiful wife. How did I get here? And so I come from the world of art, and I find myself deep in the entrepreneurial world. And in a way, I have this joke that I don't think anybody really gets unless you're me, which is that I come to the entrepreneurial world not through Peter Drucker, but through Mort Drucker, who was a Mad Magazine cartoonist. And so, I'm a co-founder of a company that has 500 elite creatives who our mission is to see them flourish. And we help them get work as a kind of facilitator in between the sort of supply side of creatives and the market side or the demand side of enterprise companies. And so we have this product in the middle that facilitates the interaction between the two in a kind of do it with me sort of space. And so we help see creatives flourish.
Oh, that's amazing. And the company is Laetro.
Yes, Laetro stands for Maestros of Light, because all of us are working with pixels nowadays. I mean, it's pretty interesting. I'm a classically trained painter. You can see I've got like oil paintings behind me. And I do a lot of digital painting, which is literally painting with pixels. It's painting with light. So we are the Maestros of Light at Laetro.
That is so cool. And I guess you said you're accidental. How did you end up arriving here? Of all places.
How did I get here? Well, rolling back a little bit.
Oh, that is a big question. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah. You want me to roll back? I can roll
Oh
back
yeah,
a little
let's
bit.
do it.
All right.
Let's roll back.
Well, I have done a universe of drawing in my life. I picked up a crayon when I was a kid and I never put it down. Uh, I come from a big Jewish family in Los Angeles that says you can be anything you want in your life. What kind of doctor or lawyer is that going to be? And so,
Uh,
I felt that maybe being a doctor or lawyer wasn't exactly for me. I got a job in a great big law firm. I hated every minute of it. And so from there, I really kind of faced 180 degrees from which way I was looking, and that was the world of art and creativity. I wanted to be at the fulcrum point of my life, that place where the pencil met the paper. And so I had done a bunch of drawings and paintings for friends for their birthdays. I collected all of those. I put them in a portfolio, took them to this place called Art Center College of Design in Los Angeles, which happened to turn out to be one of the top art schools perennially in the world. And I said, hey, if I wanted to get into an art school, what do I need to do? And
yeah.
about 3 weeks later, they said, hey, you're accepted. I walked into the law firm and I went, sayonara, this is not for me. And so I started at Art Center. And when I
What?
started at Art Center, I felt like I wanted to shift my car into sixth gear. I was so excited about the idea of creativity as a métier, as my profession. And so it happened that Disney came by to offer internships to work in their animation department. And this is a kind of partially a story of perseverance because I applied 3 times to get that internship at Disney. And the first 2 times, like they would go, it's kind of a Project Runway sort of internship. They traveled to all of the top art schools in the country. They grabbed 50 portfolios, and then they found 15 artists that they would bring into the studio. Of those, 2 or 3 would make it per year. The first 2
Holy.
years, I was in the top 50 portfolios, but didn't get invited to the studio. And I was in Los Angeles. The internship was in Florida. I thought, oh man, I need to spend a summer in Florida just getting away from Art Center because it was really challenging. And then the third year, I actually got invited to the studio, and it happened to be in Los Angeles. And it actually happened to be like 4 blocks away from where my warehouse apartment was. And so it was kind of like winning the tickets to the World Series and the Dodgers are playing. It's
Yeah.
great, but it's not a trip to Florida.
Yeah, right.
Um, so that led me to be an intern at Disney, where the artists there were better than any of my instructors. I mean, it was a pro place that was deeply deeply embedded in the idea of creativity. How do we turn a thought into a thing? You have the greatest creatives in the 20th century tinkering on these ideas about how we turn thoughts into things. How do we tell stories that move the world?
Yeah.
And I got one of the spots. I sort of joked that I had to slit a few throats to get it, but the truth is that's just a line from Aladdin. I didn't.
Yeah.
I've never been convicted. Just in case. And so I got a job as a beginning animator at Disney, and I got the job because I could draw. But they had this training system there that was really about not just the principles of animation, like squash and stretch and silhouettes and charm and things like that,
Yeah.
but the principles of the animator, like the idea of not just how to make things, but how do you make a maker? How do you build practices for a path to mastery? Because once you got into Disney, it wasn't like, that was a temporary job. I mean, when you got hired at Disney as one of the 3 artists a
Yeah.
year in the animation department, one, there was some expectations. And 2, man, you're thirsty. Like there's access to incredible knowledge there. And so everybody that I've worked with, I mean, this is whatever, 30 years later, they're all masters. And so it was an incredible training ground. I got lectures that for me made the difference between being an amateur and being a pro. It was all about being a pro. And before I left Disney, I was the one giving those talks to the younger creatives coming in. And when I left Disney, I turned that into a consultancy that kind of led me around the world, teaching the sort of technology of creativity to companies and entrepreneurs. And eventually, one of the companies this is the very long answer, Michael.
This is awesome, man. I love this.
One of the companies was Google. And there was a senior marketing director named Brett Wilms there who I worked with to help his teams understand that while we can use data science to kind of redline all of the necessary things to expose our marketing campaigns, SEO, SEM, data science, the real place where growth happens is creative. So as much as we can use technology and techniques to redline all of our data science, growth happens in creative. And where there's growth, there's innovation. Where there's innovation and growth, there's revenue. And so that is a really, that's a connect the dots that really indicates how important creative is. And if you can look at creativity like a technology, like a replicable process to build practices around, which is what we did in the animation department as creatives, then you can apply that to the entrepreneurial journey and to companies who are looking to enhance their growth. And so that led us to collaborate on things. We recognize the challenges that both companies and creatives have in finding a way to mesh their desires to be able to bring good creative and to be able to get good creative. And so we saw the fracture happening in the industry for creatives and for companies. And that's why we built Laetro. We built this place that's not just freelance. So you have on one side of the ecosystem, you have freelancers, people trying to get a job or people getting freelancers to be able to hope they can get their creative product done. On the other side, you have agencies, which is kind of a do it for you. So you have a do it yourself or a do it for you. We know all of these creatives. We know how professional they are. What if we could create something in between, which is the do it with you space? So it's not do it yourself or do it for you. It's do it with you.
Yeah.
And that means teaching both the creatives and the companies the same systems, tools, and practices that we had at Disney to be able to turn thoughts into things. And so that's kind of where I come in is, I help companies be able to turn their thoughts into things using the dopest creatives in the industries who already know a lot of this stuff. And then we kind of bridge them together and create processes and good creative for companies. So that's where Laetro lives, is a kind of a new part of the landscape in between freelance and agencies to be able to allow companies to get the creative done that they need at the level that they need it.
That's amazing. So, God, so many questions jump into my mind about Laetro, but I'd like to back up, take a skip back and go back to stuff you're learning at Disney that you ended up teaching again, and particularly about story. I think is because of all the things that Disney is known for, their story is one of them. Because you're telling story through music, you're telling story through the written word, you're telling story through color, you're telling a story through action. I guess maybe could you take me through that a little bit, and how that translates to Dave's world?
Right. Well, let me tell you a story.
Yes.
So, like I say, I got to Disney because I could draw, but I really didn't know anything about animation. I mean, there are principles to animation. It's a technology that's really amazing. And there were guys who basically invented it. They're known as the 9 old men. And in Disney, the dudes are super famous. They're legendary. Outside of Disney, everybody thinks Walt Disney made the movies, but there were these 9 guys who really were the core creatives. I mean, if they hadn't been animators, they would have been known as much as Norman Rockwell was as a painter in the 20th century. Like, they're extraordinary talents who collaborated to create a medium. So at Disney, there was this place called the Morgue. Now, they don't want you to call it the morgue. It's the Animation Research Library. It was colloquially known as the morgue. It's where all of the drawings went to be, to die. All the drawings from all of the films, the ones that we made and the ones that we didn't make, all go into this archive bunker in a nondescript building in these warehouses in Glendale. You wouldn't know it from the outside, but it takes 3 guards to get to the inner room where you're actually able to look at these drawings. They give you white gloves. You kind of feel like Mickey Mouse wearing these cotton gloves, right? And there's a draft that for every movie that shows what animator worked on what scene, how long the scene was, what the number of the scene was, a little description of it. And so that, it's basically a reference library for animation art. And so I knew that I needed to learn animation. And so I booked time in that room every week for months on end. I would go in there every week and I would study the old animation. It was a joy. I would look at like Mickey Mouse getting pulled into the swirl of the whirlpool in Fantasia, in the Sorcerer's Apprentice, and that place where he's like bringing water up and conducting the elements. The drawings were so delicious and intense and masterfully done. And so one day I go in, and this is how stories go. Then one day I go in, and there's this old guy sitting at a table where he's got villains strewn about the place. And typically there's only 1 or 2 people allowed in the room at a time, and you couldn't take drawings out. You studied them in there. You had a drawing table and a light table and magnifying glasses if you needed. And there was a window where Doug or Larry would stand, and they would, they would hand you the draft. You would figure out what scene you wanted. You tell them the scene. They'd go back into the labyrinthine corridors where all of the stacks of amazing drawings were held. They'd pull it out for you and let you look at it at a table with your white gloves. So I walk in, and there's this old guy sitting there, and Doug is at the window, and he says, "Hey, Dave, I have the pleasure to introduce you to Ollie Johnston. Ollie Johnston, this is Dave." And I said, "Mr. Johnston, it's nice to meet you." I had no idea who he was. He was one of the 9 old men, legendary animator in his 80s, doing a book on villains. So he was getting some research for it. I didn't know who he was. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Johnston. Hey, Doug, can I check out some of the double bounce walks from Jungle Book? I'd like to see the Baloo stuff, right? Because I mean, my favorite character of all time, and just the elegance of this large, heavy character moving so gracefully, right, in a double bounce walk." So he goes, "Yeah, all right, I'll get those for you." And I look at the draft, and the double bounce walks for Baloo in the Bare Necessities, Ollie Johnston, Ollie Johnston, Ollie Johnston, Ollie Johnston. I just get this chill. Oh my God. This guy's in the room with me right now. I'm like,
shit.
"Mr. Johnston, you did all of these scenes." And he said, "Well, yeah, son, that was a long time ago, but I guess I did." And so,
Holy shit!
I know, really, right? Like,
oh my God!
We had a chance to spend a couple hours in this room together. I was studying his drawings to figure out his timing, his spacing, his elegance of line. I got a chance to ask him some questions about it. And then I asked him a question that I think is another long answer to your inquiry. I said, "Hey, I'm on the other end of my career than you are. Like, I am just beginning. I'm learning animation. Like, what is the most important thing that I need to know going forward from here if I want to have a career as a creative artist in this business?" And he said, "Make it entertaining." I said, "You can tell anybody anything as long as you make it entertaining." And that super simple answer, I thought, was really extraordinary. And it sort of led me to explore, well, what are the rules of this game, right? Are there universal laws of creativity? Are there practices that we can look at? And there are. You can think about, universal laws. And I know that sounds like kind of heady and hubristic, right?
We are at opposite ends of the universe right now, Dave. You and I. So this is
Oh
this is
yeah.
very this is germane. Yeah,
All right,
I'm
cool.
in.
So we can include the universe in this whole thing,
Well,
right?
of course.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a beautiful Hafiz quote. Hafiz is this poet from 700 years ago, and he says, "The universe knows only 4 words." And when I first saw that, I was like, "Oh man, what are you talking about? It's the universe. What do you mean it knows only 4 words?" And he says, "The universe knows only 4 words. Come dance with me." And I thought, "Oh damn, you know what? I'm down with those 4 words." So, all right, that's my invitation. Come dance with me with the universal laws of creativity. They are that creatives believe, creatives iterate, creatives collaborate, creatives risk, and they complete. Inside of those 5 universal laws, there's a world of practices, some you already do, to be able to cultivate a path to creative mastery. And so the answer to your question, the long answer, is that inside of that very first one, belief, there's story. Story is one of the best practices. Cultivating the ability to tell a great story is one of the best practices to help people believe in the things that you're up to. So, as an entrepreneur or as a rebel or as someone who's moving into spaces that haven't been occupied before, man, your best weapon is story.
That is awesome. Wow. Thank you.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay, so not a non sequitur, but pretty damn close. But I'm gonna sequit over to double bounce baloo walk because I know it so well, and I'd like to like what is something that you can learn from when you were talking about that in the 5 rules and the 4 words that the universe knows. What came to my mind was this guy had the foresight to give this unwieldy, huge bear a jaunty walk, a light walk based on character. Like what do you know about that creation of that character and that his movement that can
Right.
shine a light on stuff?
Well, um, it's it, no character ever does anything out of character, right? So
Yeah.
you could say the same for a company or for yourself, right? You don't ever do anything out of character. So what is the character? So being really intentional about the who and the kind of why, as even Simon Sinek would talk about, like the why behind the thing, right? So why does he walk like that? Well, he's just groovy as F, right? And so he's just like, I'm just cruising down the street, baby. I'm just like,
Yeah.
everything is groovy, you know? And
Yeah.
so there's a story that lives inside of the character. In fact, it's when we talk to companies about this very thing, you know, if your company was a character, how would it act? How would it open a mailbox? How would it open a letter? How would it respond to somebody cutting it off in traffic? If you did some of that work on your company, then you would understand how it would respond to various cues, like a musical cue, right? Like if this is who that character is. And so there's a lot of work that can be done on a character. What is the character value? What are the principles of that character? And principles are tricky. Principles are like mottos or words to live by. Um, uh, you know, life is pain. We rise together. Like there's lots of them.
Yeah.
Know theseuton, know thyself. Um, there are principles that are rules, like an algorithm that a character lives by, and that principle leads to the story that that character lives into. And so every character's their actions are an expression of what they value and how they operate in the world. So we can do that kind of work with a company. What do you value? Your values. But most companies do like mission, vision, and values. And it's like mission
Right.
is like militaristic, right? Like mission is rough for people who are purpose driven and maybe don't necessarily buy into the mission that the higher ups have included as what you need to find important, right?
Right.
a good story, like a good company, has people finding themselves inside of the story as their own character of the story,
Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
so how do you do that with a bigger story that you're telling? You find out what are the values, the principles, and the story that that character wants to tell. And then you enliven it, you animate it and figure out, right? Like, I mean, at Disney, it was a bunch of wild horses, man. You'd be walking down the hallway and you'd see Chris over there, and he'd be like going down the hallway like this, and then he'd back up and he'd start over, and he'd go down the hallway like this, and then he'd back up and he'd do it again, and he'd go like this, right? And then you'd be, oh yeah, man, I know what scene he's working on. That's right, he's just working out his scene, right?
Hilarious.
And so you have this framework of what they find important and how they enact that importance in the world, their values and their principles. And then you animate them. You figure out how they would respond to a world given that filter for themselves.
Yeah.
A bad guy isn't just bad. He's trying to win something.
Right. Well, often bad guys don't see themselves as bad. They see themselves
That's
as
exactly it.
Yeah.
They see themselves on purpose.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They're trying to create a better world through contraction, and the good guys are trying to create a better world through expansion, and they're cross purposes.
Right. What? So, talk to me. I get animation. I get the art and stuff like that. How important is the written word to, your approach to art?
Yeah, I mean, it's a dance, Michael. It's like they sort of help each other, right? So you might have the written word that becomes obsolete after time. The two lovers sat beneath the tree watching a beautiful sunset fade into the distance, right? Well, I mean, you can paint that, and then now you don't need to say it, but you needed to say it to get to the place where you needed to paint it.
Right.
So that's why I think it's a dance that has, it has room for us to plus each other, right? To collaborate in a way that becomes additive to the intentional expression of the story that you want to tell.
Are you on purpose right now?
I am. I am. I will say that I am challenged at times by the productivity exigencies of the tech world, right? Because I kind of see it a little bit differently. My view is that purpose is paired with joy. To know that you're on purpose is your joy is an indicator of you being on purpose. I think the tech world conflates purpose with productivity in ways that tend to reduce joy. And so, I am definitely on purpose for sure. Like the thing that I'm creating is designed to have creatives flourish. I draw I draw every night, and I'm talking to you about creativity. So I am on purpose. And I'm also on a mission to invite the inclusion of joy inside of purpose and not just productivity.
Outstanding. Where does AI live in this world right now that we're embarking on in creativity and, generative AI and all that stuff? I mean, surely that's got to be on your mind.
Oh yeah, yeah. We're a tech company, among other things, but yeah, we've got to address it. It's it is a necessary thing. Now, I'll tell you, AI is it's well, it's a big topic. It's not intelligence. So let's just start with what it is. It is an incredible machine learning model that allows for us to aggregate the totality of human information and put it at our fingertips. Holy shit, that's a miracle, right?
Yeah.
There's an opportunity for us to take this information and really take our culture and society to a new level. This is one of my provocations in AI is, can we tell stories about what if it goes well? We are pretty practiced at telling the post-apocalyptic stories. I in my talks I talk about how in this 14 billion year old universe, this planet has had 100 million species on it. Of those 100 million species that have had the privileged opportunity to breathe this rarefied air, there's only one who can take knowledge, can take an experience, turn it into knowledge, modify that knowledge into wisdom, turn that wisdom into culture, and tell a story that changes the world. And that's us. We have this incredible tool. The source code of life is story. And we're one in 100 billion species that have it. Let's not waste it on fucking post-apocalyptic stories, right? Like, let's tell the stories of what if it went well, right? We have this privileged gift. Let's tell the hard stories now that we have AI. And that's my provocation to everybody who's using it. Tell the story of what if it went well. And so one of the things that we're doing at Laetro is we're building a tool that actually compensates creatives who have consented to participate in it so that they will get both credit and they'll be able to collaborate with it. So right now, one of the challenges in AI is that it's not necessarily ethical for the creatives that it has used to scrape their work to get more work done, right? I have a friend who says, man, I climbed a mountain. I used my pitons and my ice axe, and it was hard. I climbed to the top of the mountain. And then once I got there, you guys built an elevator. Now you're here snapping with your iPhones.
Yeah.
It's like, what about the acknowledgement of the work that I put in to pave this way for you? And so that's what makes the artists and the creatives angry, is the lack of acknowledgement. And that acknowledgement is both, kind of temporal and fiduciary,
Yeah, totally.
right? It's like, hey, thank you very much, but also here's a check,
Well, he bought the pickaxe and the pitons. He spent money on those tools to help him get up that mountain. And
right.
yeah,
Right. So what we're building at Laetro is actually, imagine a walled garden inside of which the creatives have consented to train a model using their styles. And then clients can come and look at a style store and they can go, oh, I love Travis Hansen's style. I want to prompt some stuff on his style.
Yes.
Well, when they do, he gets paid.
Love it.
If it doesn't land completely in where they want it to, which it tends to not, right? Because it's predictive, not creative.
Yeah,
right?
go talk with Travis now.
Right. So now we have a button that says polish with the pro. And you can go talk to Travis and Travis can say, oh, I can fix those 7 fingers for you. So then Travis gets paid there. Right. And then just for Travis being part of our ecosystem, he also gets paid. So our creatives get paid for, if somebody prompts on it, they get paid for completing it, and they get paid for being part of the ecosystem that allows for us to offer this style store to the world. It's an ethical way of doing AI. Man. And I think that for me, that's the way forward. Because right now what you have is this ecosystem that's kind of based on precedent. And the precedent was, who gives a fuck who prompted this? We're taking it from everybody. It's not ethical. Right. And so what you have is these companies who are like, well, that's not ethical. So let's make a system to poison the training model. And so you have this thing called Glaze or Nightshade. They're amazing. Artists can use them, and they add them as a watermark to their work. So when they post on social media, if that image gets scraped by a training model, it poisons the model.
What?
Right? So it
I had
gives
no
it
idea.
garbage. Right? So now all the artists can poison their model, their art, and it puts garbage into the training model. right? And then these guys on this side are like, hey, man, there's garbage coming into our training model. Let's figure out how to unpoison it. So then they unpoison it. And then these guys are like, oh, man, they unpoisoned us. Let's poison it again. And so this is going to go on. And it's
Oh,
job security, you know, right? Like it's
oh my
just
God.
the opportunity for an endless war.
Yeah.
What if you went around the war? What if you actually created an opportunity for the creatives to have consent, to get compensated, to be able to get credit where credit is due, get that acknowledgement, and to be able to collaborate with these people who are looking
Yeah.
for their work, not just throw their hands up. There's a story of this guy. It's a fantastic Polish name, which I should be able to better pronounce, Rutkowski or something like that. Mikhail Rutkowski. Uh, um, he draws these beautiful dragons. They're gorgeous, amazing dragons. They're rich in color and atmosphere, and people want to draw dragons like him. So his stuff has been prompted. Last I checked, something like 700,000 times. He's part of the lawsuit now because he's actually asked Stable Diffusion to remove him from the modeling, and it's too late. It's too wound up in everything,
Wow.
right? 700,000 times people have used his art without compensating or crediting him for it, and he didn't give consent to that. I got to say, it's hard enough being an artist, but imagine losing I mean, look at if it was even 1% of that, that's like
Mhm.
2 years worth of work for him,
Yeah.
right? So it's just what's fair. And I think that for us, our mission at Laetro, and it's been mine from the start, it's where I get my joy to be on purpose, is that I want to see my beautiful creatives flourish. And so what we're building is an opportunity for them to flourish, to be inside of the new technologies and be able to be served by them, um, not taken advantage by them.
Wow. Thank you. That's kick ass.
I hope people copy us. Like
Right?
I'm looking forward to it. The more the merrier, man. Let's create an ecosystem where the creatives are compensated and it's fair.
Very cool. Take me back to when you were a kid for a sec. What's like one of your what's a Dave memory of childhood for you?
Um, I used to always love to make art. And one of the first little businesses I did was I found out what the zodiac sign was for all the parents on my block. I grew up in the Wonder Years, man. I
Yeah.
grew up in a small town called Thousand Oaks, and every house was bought by a new parent, and there was just a parade of kids walking to school every morning.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I lived in a neighborhood with lots of kids and lots of parents. And I found out what the zodiac signs were for all of the parents. And then I had my folks had pulled down this cheap tile or it's cheap paneling off the wall. And had this really porous wooden back. And with a magnifying glass, I could draw out the zodiac signs. And so I would do them and then sell them, I don't know, for 50 cents to the parents who happily bought them. But that was kind of and I think I was probably 7 or 8, something like that. Um,
Wow.
just making art for my neighborhood. Um, but I will tell you one other story that I loved drawing, and I was, reinforced by my neighborhood to do it, and it was something that I really loved to do. People said, "Hey, you should take an art class, man. In high school, they got art classes. You should go for an art class."
Yeah.
And so I did, and I promptly got a D+ in high school art.
Yeah.
So I think that goes back to the story of persistence. What do you love and what brings you joy and your passion? And just don't be stopped. I was a Disney animator. I got a D+ in high school art.
That's one for the books. It's
Yeah.
almost cliche, isn't it?
Yeah.
To
I think I look back on it now this many years later, and I think that was actually probably a grade for behavior rather than achievement.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know,
That's interesting. What's Dave's guilty pleasure? What's the thing that you do just for you?
well, I, you mean other than like uh, cat videos and cookies and milk, that kind of thing?
If it's cat videos and cookies and milk, dude,
Well, I'll tell you,
that's cool too.
for me, it's definitely cookies and milk. But here's one of the things that I heard. Maybe I even just use this to justify me eating so much cookies and milk. But it is that if you eat cookies and milk every day, you will
Mhm.
outlive everybody that you know. And if you don't outlive them, at least you had cookies and milk every day.
There you go.
That kind of logic I find totally unassailable. And then from a philosophical standpoint, like, what's your cookies and milk? It could be cookies and milk, but it could also be whatever it is for you that day fills you up, resources you, gets you back to who you are.
Yeah. Is there how much does it's a weird question. I don't even know where it came from, but I'm just looking at the art behind you and I'm
Yeah.
wondering how much smell influences your artistic process, like the smell of paints, the smell of fresh pencil crayons, the smell of Conte. Like,
Yeah. I have this kind of blessing and a curse. It's called synesthesia. And it is that all my senses are kind of cross circuited.
interesting.
And so when I taste something, I see colors. When I smell something, the same thing. When I listen to music, I have a kind of kaleidoscopic fantasia that happens in my head. At the same
Wow.
time, when I'm in a restaurant, I hear every clack of every fork on a plate, or I tend to turn it off most of the time
Mm,
because it gets distracting.
sure.
So those multi-sensorial experiences are really important. They are like, how do you draw a smell? What is the sound of charcoal scraping across the paper?
Yeah.
Like, sometimes I just love that sound.
Yeah.
There's I guess they call it
Or
ASMR nowadays.
yeah, the pages flipping as you're doing your 60-second gestures.
Right, right, right. It's just, I think that um, the creative process is our opportunity to connect to our own divinity and listen to those muses for an expression into the world. And so all of the senses matter. We have an idea that lives in the infinite potentiality beyond the veil of the known, and in that magical space, it lives in its perfection. And our job as creators is to coax it past that membrane between the real and the infinite potentiality so that it traverses that membrane with as much fidelity as we have in our minds. And we typically don't, man. My imperfect tools, right? My imperfect tools are yanking on this cord, trying to drag this thing kicking and screaming into reality, and it comes out in an imperfect way. And so my practices are designed to, as perfectly as possible, invite this, little scared animal into the reality as perfectly as possible. And we use all of our senses to be able to make that happen. How does it smell? How does it feel? How does it sound? All of those things are part of the incredible tool we have for this temporary time to um, express our love for the creator by emulating their acts of creation.
Wow. When does a character become real?
Yeah, the second you believe. I'll tell you, um, working in animation, it's 24 drawings a second.
Yeah.
And we were doing this as pencil drawings on paper, 24 of them, typically 12 to 24 drawings a second. And somebody asked me if it was tedious. And I was like, oh man, no, because you start with a thumbnail. Like, this is the process of iterating. You have an idea, you work it out in your head, you walk around the hallways, figuring out like every single possible frame, right? Like
Yeah.
you live into it, you feel it from the inside out, right? And then you put it on paper and you scribble it and it take another pass and refine some of those scribbles. And each iteration gets you closer and closer. And you have this pad of paper that maybe has 100 drawings in it. You grab it tightly with this hand, and now it's like, it's as long as your arm, and you take it like this, and now you have a giant flip book, basically,
Yeah.
right? And you put your face in close to it, and you flip it so that it basically kind of drags across your nose, and so you're inside of the paper, and you watch it carefully, and there's a moment in the iterative process where it stops being a bunch of scribbles and it becomes a character. And you feel like Frankenstein, like you feel like screaming, "It is alive!" Right? That's a really magical moment that takes a lot of work to get to. And in a way, I call that slow magic. Like there's fast magic, which is like, is this your card? Right? Sure. That's fast magic. It's an illusion pretending to be real. This is slow magic, where you actually make reality from your illusions, your imagination, right? And so it takes more time and more heat on the athanor, the cauldron that you're cooking this stuff up in. It is a kind of slow magic, but it's a way to make something real through iterative processes, which is one of the universal laws.
That was so cool. So let's just say Dave is walking down the street. I don't know what your day looks like, but it's a winter day in California, and it's plus 70 something, so it's beautiful. Humid, I imagine.
No, it's actually pretty dry. We're in the desert here.
Oh, you guys are right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I'm challenged with geography, which is why I do this. So what is the one thing, as you're sort of traipsing through Dave's world, that you're sitting there thinking to yourself, oh man, I just wish that, people knew this thing. And it could be one thing, could be like a variety of things. It doesn't have to be earth shattering, but it's the Dave thing. It's like, I just want people to know this.
Yeah, it's really easy. How spectacularly beautiful and rare this opportunity at life is. Do you realize the ridiculous improbability of you being here right now? The utterly insane impossibility of your life on this planet right now? Not just the random luck of some sperm landing in the right place, but all of the near misses and almost fatalities that you've had in your life to get you to where you are right now. The rarity of this life that in an infinite cosmos that we were talking about earlier, that's 14 billion years old, that 90% of all of the 100 million species that have ever lived on this planet have gone extinct. That we are here right now experiencing this light or this cold or this sadness or this joy is an impossible privilege that I would love for people to not take advantage of or be ignorant of for just 3 seconds. Because there's so much grief in the world right now that we're not processing. There's so much potential for gratitude of every second. And if we could realize that gratitude, it would connect us to a kind of grace that would allow for us to not do the things we do to each other on this planet. Every life is precious. I had my goat passed away. I have goats here in Los Angeles. And I started to think about, like, how would your last day be? How would you like your last day on Earth to be, right? My goat had one. We planned it. Vet came over. It was her last day.
Oh.
And so that's a profound moment, man. You are in an infinite universe with the only place that has life is this planet. Do we even, we work with JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory. They have telescopes that can look into the distant past. They have an infrared telescope that's going to see the farthest in the past that we've ever seen. And some are saying it's up to 26 billion years ago. And still there's no life. but here. And so if I wanted people to know one thing, it is that life matters. The indescribable rare beauty of it should bring you to your knees and allow you to respect that in every other living thing.
Damn.
Yeah, that's that.
That is freaking
Yeah.
wicked, Dave. Man, you don't go small, hey?
You asked.
I love it. Thank you for that.
Yeah. I mean, I can talk about the holiday sales that are going on, but
Ah,
I mean, look at I think that we are in an exciting place where the story is changing. Now, let me offer some potential opportunities inside of that statement
okay.
or that wish. Is that me as a storyteller, I watch carefully stories because I do think that stories are they are an expression of the consciousness of of the time that we're in. And you could say that for just probably about any piece of art throughout history. It's an expression of the consciousness of its time. We, as expressors, are conduits for what is asking to be made in the world right now. And so that's what we use all of our tools to make something as an expression of the greater consciousness that says this needs to happen right now. You can look at the past, like the airplane, the Marconi's radio, things that happen simultaneously in totally different parts of the world. How did those things happen? Maybe there is some collective unconscious that's inviting the currents to express something through people in that time. Art and story are an expression of the consciousness of its time. If you look at story, there's an evolution of story happening right now that I think is really exciting. And it goes like this. It's the shift from the hero's journey to the kindred quest. And you can look at our history of story that we've had these heroes that we've invited to go out yonder, and we've told tales of the individual real life heroes and our fictional heroes in the Marvel universe and the DC universe and various other places that are artistic expressions of story for our culture. So in the old days, you had like singular heroes, Superman and Batman and
Right.
the Hulk and all of these singular heroes. And now we have the Avengers, these collective heroes. And Joanna Macy, this philosopher, talks about this evolution of story from the hero's journey, where you have a calling and then you go out to find this calling and you meet some old guy who gives you a mission, and then you go on that mission and you have to vanquish the demon, and that demon gives up some elixir that gives you some sort of extra power, and then you finish the hero's journey by coming back to your garden with this new elixir. And the truth is, you can't make that just your garden. It has to be a collective garden now. Like, you have a responsibility now after that hero's journey to use your inimitable skills to make the world a better place. And so that evolution we're seeing in storytelling right now. Stranger Things. What's on TV right now that's not a hero's journey? That's a collective journey, right? That Ready Player One, for example, right? Like the end of Ready Player One, if you haven't seen it, I'm going to spoil it. They all get together and they all lead, right? Like, we're looking, there are people who want to create communes where the structure is horizontal instead of hierarchical. We're looking at a kindred quest, that place where we collectively come together to join forces to make the world a better place. And so if you're looking for some place to find your joy, some place to be in service to the magical, rare beauty of being alive right now, then find a place to be of service in a kindred quest. Because I think that is where we're going with things. Like, companies, the zero sum game is over. It doesn't work. It's not effective economically, environmentally. People want to be on purpose in their lives. And so finding that place to be of service is a great way to access purpose.
Damn.
So that's my man. I'm just ranting all over the place, Michael.
Dude, Dave, that was so great. Like oh man, I could talk to you for hours. I
Well, I'm
thank
at your
you.
service.
Well, thank you. I would so that man, I don't even want to ask anything else. I want to leave it there because that was some of the most profound shit I've ever had on this show. So
Thank
thank you.
you. Yeah.
Um,
Awesome.
so,
Awesome.
Dave, everything we talked about will be in the show notes. And I do have one last thing, I guess,
Yeah.
to something that we've started to add here, and I'm not sure where it'll end up going, but if you could sit down and listen to one of our episodes, who would you want to hear? Who would be a guest that you think would be a story worth hearing?
You know, that's a good question. And as a rebel also, so I really like that premise. Um, you know, I think that, well, here's an interesting thing that I ran across recently. I've been playing hard at LinkedIn this year.
Yeah.
And so I've posted probably every day this year, just about every weekday this year.
Wow.
And I'm looking back at my stats, and the number one post for my whole year is one where I said, if you want to make something great, add love to it. Like adding love is what makes it's what changes things. Every master is a master of what they do because love is present for them.
Right.
I mean, even master assassins, I'm sure there's some love in it, you know, right? Like you can't get good, right? You can't get good without loving it,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
So I found that really interesting on LinkedIn. You
Yeah.
know, like I kind of expected it to be very businessy, and I think love is closer to the surface than people realize. And so I don't know, like Deepak Chopra, I'm a big fan of that guy, man. Every word he says is just magic. He's really amazing. Um, uh, I'll tell you who else is pretty stunning. Is this guy called David Eagleman? He's a Stanford brain researcher. He's doing some really interesting stuff. I think I would like to hear somebody who understands how to bridge heart and mind,
Love it.
because that's where the Kindred Quest really has room to grow. We've done a lot of stuff with mind. I think that there's room for heart.
I love it. Dave, this has been so great. And thank you so much for your generosity. This has been
It's
outstanding.
been my pleasure, Michael. Yeah. I mean, I think I rant a lot, but
these are great stories. Like every moment has been a gift, and I appreciate you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for listening. I've been your host, Michael Dargie, and this has been the RebelRebel podcast. It's a podcast for creative rebels and entrepreneurs all over the world. And hey, if you're a rebel or you know a rebel, why don't you head on over to the RebelRebelPodcast.com and fill out our guest request form. We'll get back to you within 24 hours, and maybe we can share your story with the world. Don't forget to like, share, or subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And thanks so much for listening. Until next time.